My name is Ruth Ann. Welcome back to my channel. If you have been waiting for the video about how to know what a high quality cut flower is to sell to florists, wait no longer. Here it is. My name is Ruth Ann. I'm going into my 6th year of flower farming here in my West Michigan flower farm, where I sell primarily to florists, almost exclusively. So I have about an acre in production, and that's what I do. I sell primarily to florists. And so today in this video, I'm going to talk about what makes a high quality flower. When someone says, well, you have to sell, you want to have quality flowers to florists. You don't want to have bad quality flower. What does that really even mean is what we're trying to answer here today. And I really hope that this is helpful to you. So there's a couple of different ways to think about quality and how you get to that point. So I'm going to kind of walk through it in a couple different ways. So the first is when you harvest and kind of how you harvest. So when you start wanting to think about quality of your flower, it actually happens before you harvest your flower. So you're trying to harvest to get the highest quality stem to give your florist the longest vase life, the longest stem, the right harvest stage. Like all of these things kind of go into quality. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the hydration status of the flower, which starts before you cut it. So this is pretty common knowledge, and this is probably not new to most of you, but you want to cut in the coolest part of the day. So you want to cut either first thing in the morning or in the evening when it's cooled down. Really, the first part of the morning is best, typically for most flowers. This actually can be really specific based on flower, but typically it's in the morning, which makes sense, right? It's been cool overnight. Perhaps you live somewhere like I do and you have dew and there's more moisture in the air, and the flower is going to be the most hydrated in the morning. If you have drip line and you're watering and doing irrigation, my drip line, goes off very early in the morning, or you could do it in the middle of the night, right? So you're trying to hydrate your flowers to get them at the highest hydrated state before you cut them. And then you cut in the early cool parts of the day. This gets, kind of interesting when you have lots of flowers, and there are exceptions to a few. There are actually a few flowers that it's based on like the way that the sugar goes up the stem, and it's all very, very scientific. And so there are actually certain flowers that are better later in the day because of the way that those sugars go. But for a general rule of thumb, typically harvesting first thing in the morning or in the evening in the cool parts of the day is kind of like standard number one practice. Second of all, what do you do with your flower after you harvest it? What's the protocol on my farm is I'll take a picture of it and put it on the screen, but it's called a CBBN tablet, or used to be called a Gerber tablet. It's basically a slow release chlorine tablet, and it's literally like a little tiny pill and a little tiny white pill, and it comes in a little bottle with like 800 of them. They're very inexpensive. I get them from Chrysol, and I put that in every single bucket. So basically what's going to kill your vase life of your flower is bacteria in the water, so your stem can't be hydrated, and then they need sugar to keep them looking good and having good color and continuing to open and that kind of thing. So, but we're mostly concerned about killing the bacteria or preventing the bacteria from ever really starting. And so that's what the CBBN tablet. Not every single flower is benefits from that as much as others, but it's not going to hurt any flower. And just as a standard of practice, I put it in every bucket. So I'm not thinking like, well, which bucket is going to have the, I don't even know, like have the companion in it, because I really might not need it quite as much. Nope, I just put it in every single bucket, standard. A lot of times in my sunflower buckets, I'll put 2 because they're a dirty flower and that kind of a thing. So you want to start with clean buckets, and I put a CBBN tablet in every single bucket. So that's like my standard. Now, as far as that, there's a lot of kind of debate about post-harvest care. I sell direct to florists, so I want to have like the highest quality. So, that's going to depend. Now, sometimes if I'm harvesting something and less than 24 hours later, I'm selling it. I don't always do this, but what I typically do, and I have it right here, is I put in I use this Chrysol Professional #2. I just know how like one pump goes into every bucket basically. I'm putting this in pretty much every bucket. There are some flowers that have special considerations. Some of my woodies I use this hydrating solution in, so I don't use that. I use this, like definitely would use this for hydrangeas, lilacs. 9-bark can benefit from this. So there's also something called Quick Dip, which I've never used, but some people use that like for all their sunflowers. People use that for certain woodies, which I probably will get Quick Dip here when I have certain woodies coming into production that will need Quick Dip. So that's like the post-harvest care. And really, like, every flower has specific needs. So I'm going to go over one more thing, and then I'm going to show you a couple resources. The harvest stage of a flower is extremely important as to the quality of your flower. I mean, like, paramountly important. If you harvest something at the wrong stage, it can have a base life of 4 hours, or as opposed to harvesting that same flower correctly, it could have a base life of 10 days. So you have to know how to harvest your flower. Spoiler alert, I'm not here to tell you how to harvest every single individual flower, because obviously, there's like hundreds of them, and I could not tell you, harvest this flower when it looks like this, and this flower when it looks like this, and this flower when it looks like this, because really every flower has to be harvested at a specific stage, which gives it the highest quality, leading to the longest vase life, holds up the best and different things. So how are you supposed to know that? Well, let me show you. So I have a few recommendations here. So this is how you know it. You invest in high quality, like professional books written by, floriculture scientists. That's how you know when to harvest and how to harvest your flowers. What kind of special post-harvest considerations does your flower have? This is how you know. Sure, could you look it up on the internet? Yeah, but then you're gonna have to weed through all of the noise. And does that person that you're getting the advice from really know how to harvest that flower? And really, have they actually done, trials and studies about how to harvest that flower and when to harvest that flower? So here's what I would do. I would just invest in these books that actually are written by flower professionals that have trials, and these will be your resource, and you will know, hey, I can look at this book. And I'm not just saying this like as a thing. No, like I actually own these books. In fact, before I did this video, I taped the cover back on because my cover was ripped off. I referenced this book and the other 2 books I'm going to show you all the time. So cut through the noise, cut to the chase, get yourself a book. So this is Alan Armitage and Judy Lashman's book, Specialty Cut Flowers. This is the 2nd edition. Since this has come out, Alan Armitage, I think in collection with a couple other people, has recently put out a field guide, I think is the book. It's quite new. I don't own that one. In my understanding, it's sort of the cliff notes of this textbook. This will tell you, okay, what, digitalis, like, okay, what's the harvest stage? What's the post-harvest considerations? This also gives you growing information, propagation information, environmental factors, gives you even ideas about greenhouse growing sometimes, cultivars. This is really, really, really an important book for any flower farmer to own and put on your shelf as a reference. So here's the next book for florists, for selling to florists. And actually, I know a lot of florists have this book too. Post-harvest handling of cut flowers and greens. A practical guide to commercial growers, wholesalers, and retailers. So again, this has got John Dole, Judy Lashman is also on here, and these other people. So this is a little bit easier to look at. So this is pretty beautiful. It's filled with color pictures and You can just go in here and say, okay, eupatorium. Okay, when do I cut it? What's the stage of harvest? What's the expected vase life? Is there any special shipping treatments? General information about the flower. And so it's a little bit more cut and dry, but really, really, Narcissus, like really, really an important book to also have. I think they work in tandem. I would get them both. The next book I have to show you is, you don't have to have this unless you're growing woodies, but if you are growing woodies, woody cut stems, as some of you know, I recently have gotten into a lot more woodies. This is my newest book. I didn't have this originally, but if you're growing woodies for cut flowers and selling them, this is also a really great book to have. It has some great pictures, but it is also more like of a reference style. And this is by John Dole again and Lane Greer. So you might be recognizing some of these names, John Dole, Alan Armitage. John Dole is a professor at North Carolina University, I think. Well, I hope I got that right. Yeah. Okay. John Dole is a professor of horticulture science at North Carolina State University. Yeah, like he knows what he's talking about. He runs the trials. He's a cut flower expert. Not just cut flower expert, but a cut flower post-harvest handling expert. And they run trials, and he's a very active member in the AFCFG, which if you know anything about that Association of Specialty Cut Flowers, which puts on trials and different things. But he is a professor of horticulture. He knows what he's talking about. So get rid of all the noise, skip to the chase, buy yourself some books. Now, I will say these are not cheap books. I think these are between $75 and $80, like each book. They're not cheap. So yeah, they take some money to invest in them. And they're available through the ASCFG, by the way. You can order them through their website. And if you're a member, you get them cheaper, which I am. So if you're not a member, you're going to pay even more for them. But if you are a flower farmer growing commercially, you need to own these two books. This is actually, really important books to own. Just get rid of the noise and know the answer. Know that you're getting your information from a trusted scientific person, horticultural expert that knows what they're talking about. They're not just going to give you any flu data. So that's that. So I would get those books. You must have those books in order to really understand specialty cut flowers and post-harvest care. I reference these books all season, all the time. I reference them. I mean, if this book, if you're starting seeds, you can reference this book. And this one is all about, just more post-harvest care. But you have to have those books. All right. I think we all got the point. So how do you know when to cut your flower? You check your book, your real reference book written by horticultural specialists. The second thing I will say is when I have a brand new flower that I have never grown before, I run my own test. I can read all the books. I can do all the things. But if I really want to know that my information is really spot on and I can tell my florist, this thing wouldn't even die on my counter. I had it there for 2 weeks and I finally threw it out and it looked amazing. That I think is important. So I always just try and do my own vase testing. I put little labels on things and that's important. I really think it is. It gives you puts your hand in it more and gives you more of a, personal in your brain, gives you an understanding of the flower. It also teaches you what the flower looks like. So after 5 days, it looks like this. After 6 days, 7 days, whatever the case may be. So I find that also really valuable to do your own kind of testing, because these guys are wrong, but just because it just helps you give you a better understanding of the flower and what you're selling. So that's that. So those are two places that, I would talk about. So that's kind of your pre-harvest, harvest, post-harvest, correct harvest stage, which there are some generalizations. So, spike flowers, typical generalization is if you have a spike flower like a foxglove or delphinium, snapdragon, those you harvest when they're about a third of the florets are open. A sunflower, you want to harvest that when it's super tight, like the petals on the face of the flower are just starting to lift, like 1 or 2 flowers are starting to lift. Cosmos, you want to harvest like before they're opening or just as they're really opening, because if it's pollinated by the bees, the whole flower, that particular flower, is just going to shatter. So, dahlias can't be harvested until they're mostly fully open. Same with zinnias, like it's not going to open that much after you cut it. Some flowers will continue to open beautifully after you cut them. Peonies you want to harvest when they're super, marshmallow stage tight. Daffodils, gooseneck stage, right? Like there's all these things I could throw out there. But really what's going to be the most helpful is if you actually know every flower and you have really good references and resources. So the second thing the next thing I want to talk about in regards to quality is having a cooler. A lot of people say, do you have to have a cooler to have a flower farm? No, you don't. I didn't have a cooler until the very end of my 3rd season, and I sold quite a lot of flowers before that. I did have a fridge that could hold like 2 buckets of sunflowers, but it's something. But if you look at if you look at the research of having a cooler, if you're storing flowers at 70 degrees, which is maybe like your air-conditioned house, right? If you bring the temperature down every 10 degrees, you lower the temperature, you double the life of the flower. So if you're going to bring it down to 60, you're doubling the life, and then 10 more degrees, you're doubling the life, and 10 more and 10 more. So if you're you can't freeze flowers, by the way. All certain flowers you can, but right. So if you're holding them at 35 or 40, you're giving that flower a much longer base life than if you're holding it even in your air-conditioned house. So obviously, those are some things like you want to cut it in the early stage of the day. You want to get it in the cooler and get that field heat off of it and cool that flower down to slow down its decaying process, basically. Because once you cut it, you're cutting off the life source of that flower, water, sugar, you're cutting off its life source. So you're giving it water because you're putting it in water, but how well can it take up that water? All these different considerations, right? So do you have to have a cooler? No. Do you have to have a cooler to be a high volume, high quality, sell to florist kind of farmer? Yes. I think having a cooler makes you have higher quality flowers, just in a complete generalization. It also gives you the ability to harvest flowers on Saturday and sell them on Tuesday without really any loss of quality. Because because you can harvest that flower at the right stage. That's impossible with certain flowers if you don't have a cooler. Like I couldn't harvest buckets of cosmos every day and not be able to put them in the cooler and still sell them, right? So and then likewise, I couldn't just not harvest those cosmos and just have more on harvest day, because cosmos don't work like that. So does that make sense, right? Like you're just being able to produce a higher quality flower. So that being said, if you don't have a cooler and it's your first year, don't buy one right now. Like, figure it out. And if you're moving flowers really quickly within 24 or 48 hours, that really helps you if you're having multiple sales outlets to sell the flowers. But having a walk-in cooler or having a cooler is really a game changer and really, really helpful to your business in growing, quality, quantity flowers. So then the last thing I'm going to kind of talk about is quality and like perceived quality is what I'm calling this. So you can still sell a really high quality flower that is graded differently. So you can have a grade A flower and a grade B flower that are still the same quality, but they may not have the same value. So for example, Lisianthus is kind of notorious. If you grow Lisianthus has side shoots, and your one, main stem might have 5, 7, or even more open blooms, and then also have buds, right? The same plant might have side shoots that have, 1 to 3 open blooms. Clearly, a beautiful Lisianthus with 1 or 2 blooms is not the same value as a lisianthus with 7 open blooms or 5 open blooms. So I differentiate that by selling those in 2 different grades. So I have like a grade A and a grade B. That works. However, you do have to communicate exactly what that is, what that means, and help your florist understand that. So just so they understand what they're getting. So that's how you prevent a lot of like feedback or a lot of unhappy customers, a lot of unhappy florists. If you communicate, if you're clearly communicating what the product is, it really helps. It helps the florist perceive your quality better. It's just because you're communicating with them what it is. For example, a short flower. Some florists love short flowers and need them for bud vases. And if you have short, so for example, I have some really short yarrow. I bought it as plugs. It's supposedly a really tall cultivar. I don't know. It wasn't for me at all. I have plenty of other yarrow that's super beautiful and tall. But so I had some short yarrow, like 10 inches, maybe 12. And it was really beautiful. These really big heads. It was a really pretty color. So I cut them and I sold them really quite cheap because I know some of my florists need short flowers and wanted them, and they did, and I sold some of them. I didn't really sell tons of them, but I sold a bit of them. And then I actually had one florist that really wanted that color for a wedding, and she was like, I don't care how short they are, they can be like 6 inches tall, I just really need that color, we'll wire it into the bouquet. So there are occasions where you can even have a short flower and communicate that, and you can still sell your flowers. You just have to have a price difference. You can't sell things the same price as you would a flower that's, meeting standards of like 18 to 20 plus inches and that kind of thing. So that's what I would say about quality. Okay, so I have 2 real life stories from this past season to talk about quality, failures that I had in quality, and how I dealt with them. By the way, these are just 2. There's plenty more, but so these are just 2 to give you an idea of how I would deal with that. So the first one was a campanula. So I had really gorgeous white campanula in 2024. Beautiful. I mean, gorgeous. So I had a florist reach out to me, and I had pretty much harvested the rest of my white campanula. And it was done. The crop was done, but I had it in my cooler, and she wanted it like for the following week for a wedding, and no one had currently bought this campanula. And I said, well, I already have it harvested, and I communicated it to her that this would be pushing the flower, but I could sell it to her. Well, when I sold it to her, well, first of all, okay, in that week between I said, yeah, I'll sell it to you, and then when she actually needed it, I had multiple other people asking me to buy that flower specifically. Do you have any white campanula? Then I had a florist come to pick up other things from my cooler and saw the white campanula. And it was like 8 bunches of white campanula. And she was like, oh, is that sold, or can I buy that? I was like, oh, sorry, it's sold, And so I could have easily sold this campanula a week prior to what I did. So here comes the day that the florist picks it up. The campanula looked amazing in the cooler. It looked beautiful. It didn't look bad at all in the cooler. Well, within 24 hours, the florist who was using it for a wedding contacted me and said, hey, that campanula is just really not staying hydrated, and it's all flopping, and it's really not working. None of it's working. And so I was like, well, first she asked me if I had any more, and I said, no, I don't, which I think I'd communicate that. But, I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. That was the very last of my harvest. And like I said, it was like 8 bunches, maybe it was 10. It was a significant amount of flowers. And so, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she said, that's okay. I know we were really pushing the flower. So, she wasn't upset about it. But clearly, like, she had wanted this flower, and now she didn't have it. And now I lost the whole sale, my whole sale. I had to refund her whatever it was. Like, I don't know what I even sell campanula for, but it's not cheap. And I could have sold the campanula prior. So it just was a good lesson to me. Like, don't push a flower. Clearly the campanula couldn't be pushed that long, but even still, it just was kind of like, you know what? There's like, don't push these flowers. And I would rather sell them the week before and have 2 bunches that I didn't sell that I compost than try and sell them to a florist and then the whole crop, the whole product failed. So that was one example. Here's my second example, which is honestly kind of embarrassing because I totally know better and it just was a failure in mine. It was late in the season. I had a farmer florist that wanted a bunch of, couple bunches, like 4 or 5 bunches of smoke bush for a wedding, among some other things. And this is actually a girl that I know quite well. She's another farmer and she was supplementing her flowers with some product from my farm to do a wedding, which is pretty typical. And so she wanted this smoke bush. And so I got up, I harvested it early in the morning and I left it out in the shade because it had a lot of dew on it. And so I had left it in the shade in the bucket and my intention was to, in like an hour, go put it in my cooler, which would have made the product fine. However, I forgot. You get busy. And I never got back to putting it in the cooler. Well, then the sun, the shadows of the sun changed and it had been in the shade. Now it wasn't in the shade. And then this friend of mine, farmer florist, came to pick it up. And I was like, oh shoot, like these don't even look good. They're the tips of the smoke bush were wilting and like they don't recover from that. Maybe if you gave them a second cut and put quick dip and tried and threw them in a cooler and left them in the cooler for 24 hours, like maybe they would bounce back a little bit, but they're not really going to recover from that. And so some of them looked okay. And the other flowers that were in there were fine. And it wasn't a super hot day. Like I said, this was the end of the season. I think this was either late September or October. So it's not like I left them out in 100 degrees, but still they looked really bad. And I said to her, oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to put these in the cooler and they look really bad. But there was nothing I could do at that point. I couldn't go cut her more. They would just do the same thing. They would just wilt because it was midday. I can't go cut more smoke bush. And so I was like, well, please let me know if they don't work. Cause she's so sweet. She's like, oh, it'll probably be fine. And I was like, no, I don't think it's going to be fine. And so she, followed up. I followed up with her. She followed up with me and was like, yeah, about half that smoke bush never really recovered. And I was like, yeah, I knew it wouldn't. So of course I refunded her. And, she was like, oh, it was okay. I made it work. And, I probably ordered too much anyway, which is super sweet. But I was like, I can't believe like it was so bad. It was so easily avoided. I was tired. It's the end of the season, and it just, you just like don't keep all your ducks in a row and you have crop, quality failures. It was a quality failure. And so that was just an example of something that happened this season. What I really should have done is harvested it the night before or, 24 hours the morning before. And I can't remember like what was going on, but I ended up not doing that and, thought, oh, it'll be fine the morning of. She'll pick them up in the afternoon. I'll have them in the cooler all morning. And anyway, so that was just 2 examples. So how do you deal with failures in quality? You refund the people, you apologize, and you honestly take the feedback and you learn and try and do better. That's really all you can do is take the feedback and become a better farmer. Increase the quality of your flowers. Buy a book if you need to. Reevaluate the flower. Communicate better. The last thing I have written down is if in doubt, throw it out. Which is brilliant, I know. So if you have any doubt that this flower is not high quality, just compost it. You're better off. Just throw it out. If you see that your flower has any bug bite, like chomps in it, any sign of disease like powdery mildew, which honestly can take a little bit to really like, is this powdery mildew or not? Like there are certain flowers where you're kind of like, is that what's going on with this? So just learning that, like, does it have powdery mildew? Obviously throw it out. Does it have any kind of like bugs, like aphids on it? Like, don't sell that. I mean, that's pretty standard, but sometimes you get a little caught up in the bigger picture and like you don't assess every single stem and things can get, easily lost if you're not being careful to be on top of it. So, I mean, yes, if you have a zinnia and one of the petals has a little chomp out of it, yeah, you could probably just pluck that petal off. Nobody will know. But like, hopefully you have enough quantity of flowers that you don't have to do that and you can just chuck it. So there are times where you're like, oh, there's one little petal and I could just pull that off. With certain flowers, that does work. But yeah, that's not like ideally what you really want to do. So I hope that gives you an understanding of quality. I tried to think of this from different angles. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you have any further questions about quality or if you'd like a deeper dive into something other specific. Because obviously I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg here. I totally get that. That's all I have for you today, except to say if you want my new guide about tips for selling to florists, it's in the description below. Click the link, florists.abundantbloomsflowerfarms.com. It's in the link. I'm pretty excited about this. I had fun putting this new guide together for you, and I hope that it will be helpful to you. So click the link in the description and get that free guide. I hope that kind of maybe will give you even some more information about helping you sell flowers to florists. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It's been really fun here on YouTube getting started and having a lot of interest and getting a lot of fun comments. And I really appreciate that. It really has been so encouraging to me. I love this flower farming community, and I hope that I'm able to give back to you in a small way. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.